3 weeks after my cervical spine surgery, my son and daughter-in-law picked me up from the hospital. She smiled, handed me water, and said, "Drink up, Dad." 20 minutes later, my head began spinning. Instead of taking me home, they drove onto a deserted mountain road. My son shoved me down a rocky slope. "Plenty of wolves out here, Dad." His wife smiled. "Hope someone finds you first." They drove away convinced I would never return. Welcome to Dad's Revenge Stories. I am so grateful you are here. Comment below with your city or country so I know where you are watching from. Also, please note, this story includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm conveying to you is highly useful. 3 weeks after they sawed open the back of my neck and rebuilt what was left of my cervical spine, I was finally getting out of that hospital. I want to be real with you about something right up front. I am not a man who complains easily. 71 years old, 35 years working insurance fraud investigations in Denver, Colorado. I have sat across the table from people who faked paralysis for 6 months just to collect a check. I know what real suffering looks like, and I know what theater looks like. But I will tell you honestly, performance in that catalog came close to what the real thing felt like those 3 weeks in Denver General. A cervical spine surgery at my age is not a gentle business. They put a hard plastic collar around my neck that ran from my collarbone to just below my ears, and for 21 days I ate hospital food, stared at a drop ceiling, and told myself that the worst of it was behind me. The morning of my discharge, a young nurse named Sandra helped me into a fresh set of clothes my son had brought the day before, a soft flannel shirt, khaki pants, my brown leather belt that I have owned since 1987. She was checking my vitals one last time when I heard the elevator doors open down the hall, and then I heard his voice. "Dad." Daniel came around the corner fast, already smiling, already reaching out to take my arm. 41 years old, and he still moved through a room the way he did at 16, like he owned the square footage. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. He gripped my hand and then pulled me carefully into a hug, one hand light on the back of my collar, so he would not jostle the brace. "You look good," he said, pulling back and studying my face with those sharp brown eyes. "You look 100 times better than last week." "I look like a man wearing a neck brace," I said. He laughed, that big, easy laugh that had charmed teachers and coaches and every person he had ever needed something from. "Emily's downstairs pulling the car around. She would not let me carry anything without her supervising." Right on cue, Emily appeared in the doorway of my room, a bouquet of yellow tulips in one arm and my overnight bag in the other. 38 years old, dark hair pulled back, wearing a cream-colored blouse that made her look like she had stepped out of a magazine rather than a hospital corridor. She set the flowers on the nightstand and crossed the room to kiss me on the cheek. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked, and her voice was warm, the way a fireplace is warm, the kind that makes you want to lean in closer. "Stiff," I said. "Ready to be home." "Then let's get you home." She squeezed my hand. Sandra began going through my discharge papers at the foot of the bed: medications, follow-up schedule, physical therapy, appointments, restrictions. Daniel stood beside her with his arms crossed, nodding along seriously, asking exactly the right questions. What activities should be avoided? How long before I could drive? Whether the pain in my left shoulder was normal or something to watch. I watched him do it, and I felt something expand in my chest. Something I had been missing for the 6 years since Carol passed. That feeling of not being alone in a room, of having someone who gave a damn about the answers. But then I noticed Emily had drifted to Sandra's side as well, and she was asking her own question. Her voice dropped half a register, the way people do when they are trying to be discreet in a shared space. For someone his age, post-surgery, If he's given a sedative for anxiety or sleep, what's the safe window before it builds up in his system? He's already on the pain medication from the discharge list. Sandra answered with the kind of patient efficiency that nurses develop after years of fielding family questions. She explained drug interaction thresholds, how older patients process sedatives more slowly, how what might be a mild dose for a younger person could hit someone Richard's age much harder and linger much longer. Emily nodded, thanked her quietly, and turned back toward me with that same warm smile. I told myself it was exactly what it looked like, a careful daughter-in-law, making sure she understood how to take care of me properly. I had been cared for by professionals for 3 weeks. It made sense she would want to know the details. I told myself that. And I believed it. Daniel took my arm and guided me into the wheelchair Sandra brought in for the ride to the lobby. Hospital policy, no exceptions, even for men who can walk on their own and find the whole thing slightly undignified. He pushed me down the hallway himself, waving off the orderly. "I've got him," he said, and his hand on the chair handle was steady and sure. In the elevator, Emily stood close and adjusted the strap on my overnight bag. Daniel hummed something low under his breath, an old country song I half recognized but could not name. "Emily made your guest room up fresh," Daniel said. "Clean sheets, blackout curtains. She put one of those white noise machines in there because she read it helps with recovery sleep." "You didn't have to do all that," I said. Emily reached over and patted my forearm. "You took care of Daniel for 18 years before you even knew I existed. The least we can do is take care of you for a few weeks." Her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She had that gift making whatever she said sound like the most natural, loving thing in the world. The lobby doors slid open, and the March air hit my face cold and thin, the way Denver air always is at this altitude, carrying that faint smell of pine from the mountains to the west. Daniel's SUV, a black Chevrolet Suburban, practically brand new, was idling at the curb. He opened the rear passenger door and helped me in, taking real care with my neck, one hand guiding my head so I would not catch the brace on the door frame. Then he reached across and buckled my seatbelt for me, and for 1 second his face was very close to mine, and I thought I saw something move behind his eyes, something quick and unreadable. But then he was smiling again, stepping back, closing the door. Emily loaded my bag into the trunk. I watched through the rear window. She lifted the hatch, set the bag inside, and then reached past it toward something already in the trunk. A small black duffel I had never seen before. She adjusted it, re-zipped it, and closed the hatch quickly. She did it in maybe 4 seconds. She did not look up. I turned back around and told myself it was nothing. Probably gym clothes. Probably nothing. Daniel got behind the wheel and pulled smoothly away from the curb. "Ready to go home, Dad?" he said. "More than you know," I said. He smiled at me in the rearview mirror, and we drove. Denver slid past the windows the way it always does when you have been cooped up somewhere too long. Like the city is reminding you it kept moving without you. I watched the hospital district give way to the warehouse blocks on Santa Fe, and then the highway opened up heading west, and the mountains filled the windshield, the way they always do, white-capped and enormous, and the same as they have always been, and I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in 3 weeks. I am a Denver man, born and raised. 60 years of looking at those mountains every morning has never once made them ordinary to me. "You doing okay back there?" Daniel asked. "Better every mile," I said, and I meant it. Emily had the passenger seat reclined slightly, one knee up, scrolling through something on her phone. She glanced back at me over her shoulder. "We stopped at Rosario's last night," she said. "Saved you the leftover lasagna. It's in the fridge at home." Rosario's was the Italian place on South Pearl Street that Carol and I used to go to for anniversaries. I had not been back since she passed. "You didn't have to do that." You've mentioned that restaurant about 15 times in the last year, Emily said, and she laughed softly. I figured it was time. I felt my throat tighten in a way I was not expecting, and I turned back toward the window so they would not see my eyes go red. 6 years, and the smallest things still caught me off guard. A song on the radio, the smell of pine, a restaurant on South Pearl Street. About 20 minutes out of the city, Emily reached into the bag at her feet and produced a bottle of water, one of those plain, clear plastic ones already opened. She twisted back in her seat and held it out to me. You need to stay hydrated, she said. Patricia was very clear about that. The pain medication dehydrates you. I know. I took the bottle. You sound like the nurses. Good, she said. Drink. I drank. The water was cold and tasted the way bottled water always tastes, faintly of plastic, and nothing, which is to say, perfectly fine. I drank about half of it and set it in the cup holder beside me. Daniel had the radio on low, some sports talk station. A couple of voices arguing about the Broncos' draft picks. He was one hand on the wheel, relaxed his elbow on the armrest. The picture of a man on a routine drive. I watched the highway signs and I felt the pull of sleep, the way you do after surgery, when your body is still burning through the effort of healing, and every quiet car ride becomes an invitation to close your eyes. I fought it for a few minutes, looking out at the bare scrub oak along the highway shoulders, watching a hawk riding a thermal high above the westbound lanes. Then I noticed the exit. I know Highway 285 the way I know my own driveway. 40 years of driving these roads for work, pulling off onto 2 tracks and county roads to verify accident scenes and photograph claim sites. The exit for Daniel's neighborhood, a quiet development in Lakewood, 12 miles southwest of downtown, comes up well before the mountains start to climb. We had passed it. Not by a little, by several miles. I sat up straighter, and the brace caught under my chin. Daniel, my voice came out slower than I intended. That was your exit. Back there. He did not answer right away. His eyes stayed on the road. Daniel. Heavier this time, more insistent, though my tongue felt thicker than it should have. Emily turned around again. Her expression had not changed at all. That same open, composed face. We're taking the scenic route, Dad, she said. You always said you loved the mountains in March. The snowpack's beautiful right now. I started and then I stopped because something was wrong with the way my own sentence felt leaving my mouth. The words were there, but they were coming slowly, like they were traveling through something thicker than air. I looked at the water bottle in the cup holder. I looked at Emily's face. She was watching me with a kind of careful, precise attention that had nothing in it of warmth. Just watching. The way you watch something to see exactly when it stops moving. Emily. My hand came up to grip the door handle, but my fingers would not close the way I told them to. What did you put? Shh, she said. Not unkindly. The way you shush a child who is fussing about something that has already been decided. Daniel's eyes found mine in the rearview mirror, and for the first time that day, the smile was completely gone. Just rest, Dad, he said. You just had major surgery. Your body needs rest. Daniel. I said his name the way I said it when he was 15, and I caught him in a lie about where he had been on a Friday night, low and flat and certain. Turn this car around. He did not turn the car around. My left hand would not grip the door handle. My right hand was resting in my lap, and I could not seem to make it lift. The highway signs overhead were blurring at the edges, the green rectangles bleeding into the white sky behind them, and I knew with the part of my brain that was still clear and cold and working exactly what was happening to me. 35 years in fraud investigation means you know what a drugged man feels like because you have interviewed enough of them. You know the way the edges go soft and the weight comes into your limbs, and the world starts to feel like something happening on the other side of a very thick window. My voice broke and came back thinner. This isn't Daniel, this isn't. Close your eyes, Emily said. Her voice floated toward me from very far away. You're exhausted. You just don't know it yet. I turned my head toward the window, slow, agonizing, the brace dragging against my shoulder, and through the glass I saw a highway sign passing overhead. Not a Denver sign. Not a Lakewood sign. A sign for a county road I recognized from 30 years of driving these foothills, a connector that fed into the high mountain corridors west of the city where the paved roads thinned out, and the distances between anything human got very, very long. That was the last clear thing I saw. The mountains, the sign, the sky going white at the edges, and then the world went dark, cold. That was the first thing I felt when the world came back, not sight, not sound, but cold. The deep, raw, bone-level cold that comes off pine trees at altitude in March. The kind that does not just sit on your skin, but pushes through it, gets into the joints, reminds every old injury you have ever had exactly where it lives. My neck screamed inside the brace. My left shoulder felt like someone had driven a railroad spike into it while I was out. I opened my eyes. Trees. Nothing but trees, thick-trunked ponderosa pines running in every direction, the late afternoon light coming through the canopy in long, broken slants. The SUV was still running. I could feel the vibration of the engine through the seat cushion beneath me. Then the door opened. The water bottle was gone. I registered that before anything else, the cup holder beside me was empty. Someone had taken it. Daniel stood there. Not the Daniel from the hospital hallway, not the one with the easy smile and the hand on my shoulder, and the questions about my medication schedule. This Daniel had no expression at all. His face was the face of a man who had already made a decision and was simply now executing it the way you would execute any other item on a to-do list. He reached in and grabbed my arm. "Come on," he said. "Get up." "Daniel." My voice came out wrong, thick, unsteady, the lorazepam still heavy in my blood. "Daniel, what is happening? What are you doing?" I said, "Get up." He pulled, and the pull was not gentle. I grabbed the doorframe with my right hand. My grip was nothing. 3 weeks of surgery and sedation had taken everything out of me, and whatever Emily had put in that water had taken what was left. Daniel's hand closed around my forearm, and he hauled me upright, and the world tilted so hard I nearly went down right there against the side of the car. He walked me half-walked, half-dragged, through a thin stand of trees, to a place where the ground dropped away sharply. A rocky, root-crossed slope that fell maybe 30 feet before it leveled out into a thicket of scrub oak and deadfall. Not a cliff. Not a movie villain's precipice. Just a slope steep enough and long enough that a 71-year-old man in a cervical collar with lorazepam in his bloodstream and 3 weeks of surgical recovery behind him had absolutely no way of getting back up it on his own. He had chosen the spot carefully. I understood that in the part of my brain that was still cold and working. He had chosen it carefully. Daniel. I turned to face my son, and I felt my eyes burn and my throat close up, because even then, even right at that moment, some part of me was certain there was an explanation. Some part of me was still his father, still the man who had coached his little league team and taught him to drive on the back roads outside of Evergreen, and stood at the back of the church the day he married Emily, and felt his chest fill up with something so full it was almost painful. "Son, look at me. Whatever is happening right now, Whatever you think you need to do, you do not have to do this. You talk to me. You tell me what's wrong, and we fix it. That is what we do. That is what we have always done. Something moved behind his eyes. Just for a second. Something that might have been the boy I raised looking out through the face of whoever this man standing in front of me had become. Then it was gone. "Goodbye, Dad," he said. And he put both hands flat on my chest, and he pushed. I went backward down that slope the way old men fall badly, completely with nothing left to catch myself. My right hand clawed at a root and missed. My hip hit a rock and sent a white bolt of pain all the way up my spine. The brace caught on a low branch and wrenched my head to the side, and I heard myself make a sound I am not proud of, raw and desperate, and not like any sound I had made in my adult life. I came to rest against a cluster of exposed roots about 2/3 of the way down, face toward the sky, the cold of the earth going straight through my jacket. Above me, at the top of the slope, Daniel stood with his hands in his coat pockets. Emily had appeared beside him. She was looking down at me with an expression that I can only describe as clinical, the way you might look at a problem that has been resolved. "Lots of wolves out here, Dad," Daniel said. His voice was perfectly even, not angry, not sorry, just a man stating a fact about the local wildlife. Emily tilted her head and let a small smile touch the corner of her mouth. "Hope someone finds you before they do." And then they turned around and walked back through the trees, and I heard the SUV doors close one after the other, solid and final, and I heard the tires crunch on the frozen ground, and then there was nothing but the wind moving through the pine canopy above me, and the sound of my own breathing, which was coming too fast and too shallow and fogging in the freezing air. I lay there with the roots pressing into my back, and I tried to get control of my breathing, the way my doctor had told me to, when the pain spikes slow and slow out, slow and slow out. My left hip was on fire. My shoulder felt genuinely broken, though I would later learn it was only badly bruised. The brace had twisted during the fall, and the edge of it was cutting into the underside of my jaw. And my son had just left me here to die. I want you to sit with that sentence, because I have had to sit with it every day since. Not the physical danger of it, though, that was real, and I will get to that, but the plain, simple, declarative fact of it. My son. The child I raised. The boy I drove to school and grounded for lying, and lent money to and worried about, and prayed for, and was proud of God, helped me right up until the moment he put his hands on my chest in a Colorado forest and said goodbye like it was nothing. That is a thing that breaks something in you that does not fully heal. I do not care how strong you think you are. I cried. I am not ashamed to say that. I lay there against those roots in the freezing mountain air, and I cried in a way I had not cried since the day I buried Carol ugly and deep and entirely beyond my ability to stop. My hands shook against the frozen ground. My chest heaved against the brace until the edge of it dug into my jaw so hard, my eyes watered from the pain. And then, because I am who I am, I stopped. I pressed the back of my head against the roots, and I stared up at the narrow strip of sky visible through the pine canopy, and I said out loud to no one, to the trees, to whatever was listening, "All right, what do we have to work with?" 35 years of investigating fraud teaches you one thing above all else: panic is information you cannot afford. I did a slow inventory, arms functioning barely, legs responding painfully, voice intact. The lorazepam was still in my system, but it was thinning. I could feel the edges of my thinking getting sharper by degrees. The slope was too steep and too loose to climb without something to hold. The light was dropping fast. In the mountains west of Denver in March, night temperatures regularly fall below 20 degrees. From somewhere deep in the timber to my left, came a sound, low, deliberate, the specific sound of something large moving through underbrush, without particular hurry. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself that very firmly. I do not know exactly how long I lay on that slope before I heard the footsteps. Long enough for the light to go from gold to gray. Long enough for my hip to stop screaming and settle into a deep, grinding throb that was somehow worse. Long enough for me to work through every option I had, which took about 4 minutes, because there were not many, and arrive at the conclusion that my best and only move was to get myself to the road however long that took, and however much it hurt, and hope that someone came down it before the temperature finished what Daniel had started. I had managed to get myself turned over and was working on getting my knees under me when I heard them. Footsteps, not the random crack of a branch settling in the cold, but deliberate rhythmic footsteps moving through timber with the ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times before. Moving in my direction. I did not let myself hope. Not yet. Instead, I hauled myself upright against the nearest pine trunk, got my feet under me and put every cubic inch of air I had left in my lungs into one word. Hey. The footsteps stopped. Hey, down here, I need help. A pause. 3 full seconds that felt like 30, and then the footsteps changed direction and came toward me faster now, and a figure appeared through the trees above me on the slope. A man. Older, maybe early 70s, wearing a canvas field jacket the color of old moss, and carrying a walking staff that looked like it had been cut from a branch somewhere in these same woods. He had white hair and a close-cropped white beard, and the kind of face that has been outdoors in all weather for so long, it looks like it was carved rather than grown. He stopped at the top of the slope and looked down at me, took in the brace, the torn jacket, the way I was holding myself against the tree, and he came down that slope without a word of hesitation, moving sideways and sure-footed across the loose rock and roots, and he was beside me in under 30 seconds. Easy, he said. I've got you. Don't move your neck. His hands were on my arms, steadying firm without being rough. Can you tell me where it hurts? Everywhere, I said, and my voice broke on the word in a way that had nothing to do with pain. My hip took the worst of it. Left shoulder. I'm post-surgery cervical spine 3 weeks out. The brace shifted in the fall. Okay. He was already adjusting the brace with careful, practiced hands, resettling it properly against my jaw and collarbone. My name is Jack Morrison. I'm a retired forest ranger, 40 years with the National Forest Service out of this district. I know this terrain better than my own backyard. He met my eyes directly. You're going to be all right. I mean that as a factual statement, not a comfort. Richard Carter, I managed. Denver. All right, Richard Carter from Denver. He got himself under my left arm, taking my weight, with the ease of a man who had pulled injured hikers off worse slopes than this one over 4 decades. There's a fire road about a 1/4 mile north. My truck's parked there. We're going to take this slow, and we're going to get you there. You tell me if you need to stop. I won't need to stop, I said. He glanced sideways at me. Stubborn man. Extremely, I said. He almost smiled. Good. Stubborn keeps you moving. We worked our way across the slope and into the timber, Jack navigating by some internal map I could not read, choosing paths through the deadfall that I would never have found on my own. My hip made every step a negotiation. My shoulder sent sparks up into my neck every time my foot hit uneven ground. But Jack took the weight, and he kept talking, steady, calm. The low, continuous voice of a man who knew that sound was what kept people from disappearing into shock. You hunting? He asked. No. Hiking. I did not answer right away, and in that pause Jack glanced at me again, and something in his face shifted, a slight sharpening, the look of a man whose job for 40 years required him to read situations quickly. "Richard," he said, keeping his voice easy, "how did you end up on that slope?" I looked at him. The pain was making my eyes water, and my jaw ache from where the brace had twisted, and I was cold down to the marrow, and the full weight of the last 4 hours was sitting on my sternum like a stone. "Someone put me there," I said. Jack did not react with shock. He did not ask me to repeat myself. He just nodded once slowly, the way a man nods when something he suspected has been confirmed. "Okay," he said. "Let's get you to the truck first." His truck was a 2009 Ford F250 dark green with a National Forest Service decal still on the rear window, even though he had been retired for 2 years. He got me into the passenger seat, cranked the heat all the way up, and pulled a wool blanket from behind the seat that smelled like wood smoke and pine sap. He wrapped it around my shoulders and then he handed me a thermos. "Coffee," he said. "Black. Don't argue." I wrapped both hands around the thermos and felt the heat go into my palms and my fingers, and I pressed the heel of my hand against my mouth for a second because my chin was trembling, and I was not going to fall apart in this man's truck. I was not. "Take your time," Jack said. He sat in the driver's seat with the engine running, and he looked out through the windshield at the darkening tree line, and he waited. I took 3 slow breaths. Then I told him. All of it, the hospital, the water bottle, the wrong exit, the slope, Daniel's hands on my chest. The words. Emily's smile. The sound of the doors closing. When I finished, Jack's hands were resting on the steering wheel, and his jaw was set in a way that made the lines of his face harder and older than they had looked on the slope. He stared through the windshield for a long moment, and then he said very quietly, "Your own son." "Yes," I said. "How old is he?" 41. Jack exhaled through his nose a slow, controlled sound that carried a great deal in it. Then he turned to look at me direct and clear. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. I drove down that fire road at approximately 2:15 this afternoon on my way out to check my trail cameras. There was a black Chevrolet Suburban parked at the trailhead turnout when I passed going in. It was gone when I came back." He reached past me and opened the glove compartment. Inside was a small field notebook worn soft with use. I wrote down the partial plate. Force of habit. 40 years you stopped being able to turn it off. My heart lurched so hard in my chest that I felt it in my throat. "Jack, I know," he said. He closed the glove compartment and looked at me steadily. "So, do you want to call the police right now? Or do you want to tell me the rest of the story first?" He held my gaze without flinching. "Because I have a feeling there is more." The thermos was warm in my hands. Outside, the last gray light was fading out of the sky over the mountains. And right then, sitting in that truck with the heat running and the wool blanket around my shoulders, something surfaced from the back of my mind, a memory I had filed away without knowing why. A week before, any of this happened in a garage in Lakewood on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. A black phone. On the floor under a shelf. In my son's garage. I had picked it up. I had not opened it. But Daniel had seen it in my hand. "There is more," I said. "A lot more." I looked at Jack and felt something cold and certain settle into place behind my ribs. Not fear, not grief, but the feeling I knew from 35 years of work. The feeling of a case beginning to take shape. "Give me a few minutes, and then I'll tell you everything." The fire in Jack's cabin burned the way only a real wood fire burns, not clean, not quiet, but alive, popping and shifting and throwing heat in uneven waves that made one side of you too warm and the other side still cold. I had both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I had not touched in 10 minutes, because I was somewhere else entirely. I was in Daniel's garage, 1 week ago, on a Tuesday afternoon. "You went somewhere," Jack said from across the hearth. "I'm thinking," I said. "Give me a second." He gave me the second. Jack Morrison was the kind of man who understood that silence between two people did not need to be filled, but I was not going to let it sit there and swallow me. I set the mug down on the arm of the chair and I said, "I need to tell you something. Something that happened before any of this. Before the hospital, before the surgery." Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm listening." "About a week before I was discharged," I said, "I had a good day. Pain was manageable, they let me move around a little. Daniel came by in the afternoon, said he needed to drop off some paperwork. Insurance stuff, home documents, things I'd asked him to bring from the house. I pressed my thumb hard into my palm, the way I always did when I was reconstructing a sequence, making sure I had the order right. He told me to wait in the car while he grabbed the papers from the garage. But I needed to use the bathroom, and I didn't feel like sitting in a parking lot, so I went in through the side door. "He didn't know you came in," Jack said. "He was upstairs. I could hear him on the phone." I looked into the fire. The garage was dim. I was moving slow hand on the wall for balance, and I nearly tripped on something. I looked down, it was a phone. Black no case just lying on the floor under the bottom shelf of his tool rack. Face down. Jack said nothing, but his eyes sharpened. "I picked it up," I said. I was going to put it on the workbench so it wouldn't get kicked under something. And then I heard Daniel's footsteps on the stairs, and he came through the door into the garage, and he saw me. I stopped. My chest tightened the way it had that day, that same cold, contracting feeling. He saw the phone in my hand and his face. I pressed 2 fingers against my sternum. "Jack, I have spent 35 years watching people's faces in the moment they realize they've been caught. I know what that looks like. It looks exactly like what I saw on my son's face in that garage." "What did he do?" Jack asked, his voice low and careful. "He covered it in about 2 seconds," I said. He smiled. He crossed the garage, he took the phone out of my hand, he said, "Oh, that old thing, thanks, Dad." And he put it in his coat pocket, and he changed the subject so smoothly I almost believed it. I shook my head. "Almost, but I filed it. That's what I do. I file things." "You didn't open it," Jack said. Not a question. "Never touched the screen," I said. I picked it up, he walked in, I handed it to him. Maybe 10 seconds total. I looked up at Jack and felt the words land in the room with their full weight. He doesn't know that. He saw the phone in my hand, and he made an assumption. And whatever is on that phone, whatever Daniel was so afraid I had seen, that is why I am sitting in your cabin tonight, instead of in the ground. Jack exhaled long and slow and through his nose. He stood up from his chair and walked to the window and looked out at the black tree line for a moment. And when he turned back, his face had the expression I was beginning to recognize as his version of very serious. "So he didn't try to kill you for your house or your bank account," Jack said. "No," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "He tried to kill me for what he believed I had already seen. And here's the thing that keeps turning over in my head. Whatever is on that phone, it scared him enough to do this." I gestured with one hand at the brace, at the bruises, at the entirety of the evening. "Not threaten me. Not try to buy my silence. Kill me. Which means what's on that phone is not just embarrassing. It is catastrophic." Jack came back to his chair and sat down heavily. "Do you know where the phone is now?" "Daniel has it," I said. But Daniel is not a man who throws things away. He never has been. When he was 17, he kept every receipt, Every birthday card, every document. I used to tease him about it. I felt my throat tighten on the memory, my boy at the kitchen table with his little accordion file of saved papers, and I pushed it back down hard. He moved the phone. He probably wiped it, but he didn't destroy it. Men like Daniel don't destroy things, they move them somewhere they think is safe. And you know where that somewhere is, Jack said. I have a very good idea, I said. Jack leaned forward. Then we go to the police tonight, Richard. Right now. You tell them everything you just told me. You hand them the partial plate from my field log, and you let them— Not yet. I said it quietly, but I said it firmly, and Jack stopped. I have watched guilty men walk free my entire career because the evidence wasn't ready when someone pulled the trigger too early. I am not going to let that happen to my own son's case. I met his eyes. I need 48 hours. I need to talk to my lawyer, and then I need to do one thing before I walk into any police station. What thing? Jack asked. I picked up the coffee mug. Finally took a sip. It had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. I need to make sure, I said, that when Daniel finds out I'm still alive, and he will find out he walks straight into what I've already built, not the other way around. I want to be honest with you about the decision I made that night because I know how it sounds. An old man with a neck brace and bruised ribs who has just been left for dead in a Colorado forest, deciding not to call the police, deciding instead to sit by a fire and make a phone list. I know how that sounds. But I need you to understand something about what 35 years in fraud investigation actually teaches you. It teaches you that the first call you make sets the shape of everything that comes after. Jack, I said, do you have a landline? He pointed at the wall near the kitchen. An old cordless phone on a charger, the kind nobody has used since 2005. I pushed myself out of the chair. My hip sent a white-hot complaint all the way up to my shoulder, and I crossed to it, and I dialed a number I have had memorized for 20 years. It rang 4 times. Then Webb. Martin, I said. It's Richard Carter. I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not ask me if I'm all right because I'm not, and we don't have time for that conversation. A sharp intake of breath on the line. Martin Webb had been my personal attorney since 1994. A trim, precise man in his early 60s who had handled my estate planning, my retirement accounts, and 2 insurance litigation cases I had referred his way over the years. He was not a man who rattled easily, but his voice, when it came back, had something in it I had never heard before. Richard, where are you? Safe, I said. Not at home. Martin Daniel tried to kill me tonight. I need you to hear that sentence, and I need you to believe it, because what I'm about to ask you to do depends on you believing it completely. 3 seconds of quiet. Then Martin said, Tell me. I told him. I kept it tight, the car, the water, the forest, the slope, the words. Daniel said. By the time I finished, I could hear Martin's breathing had changed. Controlled, deliberate. The way a man breathes when he is angry and making himself think anyway. Richard, he said, and his voice was careful the way a man's voice is careful when he is choosing each word like he is diffusing something. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not go home. Do you understand me? Do not go anywhere near your house, Daniel's house, or anywhere Daniel knows to look for you tonight. I wasn't planning to, I said. Good. I heard him moving a chair, rolling a drawer opening. I'm going to start pulling your financial documents tonight. Every account, every asset, every arrangement you've made in the last 3 years. I want to know exactly what Daniel has access to and what he doesn't. He paused. How much did you let them into your finances? I closed my eyes. Less than they wanted. More than I should have. I gripped the phone tighter. Martin, there's something else. A phone. In Daniel's possession. I don't know exactly what's on it, but whatever it is, it's the reason he did this. Not the money. The phone. Martin went very quiet on his end. The productive kind of quiet. The kind where a good attorney is reorganizing everything he just heard. All right, he said finally. Don't touch anything related to that phone. Don't try to access it. Don't ask about it. Don't mention it to anyone outside of this call until I tell you it's time. Understood. Understood, I said. Get some rest, Martin said. And then before he hung up, Richard, I'm glad you called me instead of the alternative. His voice cracked on the last word just slightly, just enough to tell me what he meant. I'll be in the office at 7. Call me then. I set the phone back in the cradle and stood there with my hand still on it and my forehead pressed against the cool wall of Jack's kitchen, and I breathed. In, out, in, out. Well, Jack said from the doorway. My lawyer, I said, straightening up. 20 years. Good man. I turned around and walked back to the fire. He's pulling my financial documents tonight, and he told me not to go home. Smart lawyer, Jack said. Always has been. I lowered myself back into the chair and picked up the notepad Jack had put on the side table for me, an old one with a Forest Service logo on the cover. I uncapped the pen. Now, I need to think about what Daniel does tomorrow morning. Jack crossed his arms. He reports you missing. Exactly, I said. Because he has to. If he doesn't and I turn up alive, the first question is why he didn't call anyone when his father didn't come home. I started writing. He'll call it in tomorrow morning. He'll say I was confused, disoriented, that I wandered off. He'll frame it as a medical issue, the surgery, the medication age. My pen moved fast, the words coming out of the muscle memory of 100 investigations. He'll be believable. He's good at that. And the police will look for a confused old man, Jack said, and there was a hard edge in his voice I had not heard before. Not a crime victim. For a while, I said. Yes. I looked up at Jack. Which is exactly why I need to walk into that police station with something they cannot explain away with a medical chart. I tapped the pen against the notepad. I need the camera footage from the hospital. I need the traffic cameras on 285 westbound. And I need your field log. Jack nodded, slow and certain. You have the log. I know. I looked back at the notepad. My handwriting was shakier than it used to be. The bruising, the cold, the evening in general, but the list was clear. 3 items, 3 things before I made myself visible again. There is one more thing I need, I said, and it means going somewhere Daniel will not expect. Jack raised an eyebrow. Where? I set the pen down. My hip throbbed. My shoulder ached. Every part of me that was 71 years old was filing its complaints in full. His neighborhood, I said. I need to watch him, before he knows I'm watching. Jack's expression shifted, not alarm exactly, but the look of a man recalculating. Richard, that's the one place. I know, I said. I know exactly what it is. That's why it has to be me. I looked at him steadily. I know how Daniel moves. I know his patterns. And there is something specific I need to confirm before any of this goes to a courtroom. I paused. There's something he does every Tuesday night. I noticed it 3 months ago before the surgery, when I was still driving myself to his neighborhood for dinners, and I filed it away without knowing why. I think I know why now. Jack studied me for a long moment. You're not going to tell me what it is yet, are you? Not yet, I said, because I might be wrong, and I have never liked presenting a theory I haven't tested. The morning after Jack's call with Martin, I woke up on a cot in the back room of the cabin with my hips screaming, and the smell of pine smoke in everything: my hair, my borrowed flannel shirt, the wool blanket I had pulled over myself somewhere around 3 in the morning when the fire died down. I lay there for a moment and stared at the ceiling and did what I had trained myself to do every morning of a difficult case I made myself think before I moved. What do I have? What do I need? What is the next step? Jack was already up. I could smell coffee and hear him moving in the kitchen, the particular unhurried rhythm of a man who has been waking up alone in a quiet place for a long time and has made his peace with it. I pushed myself upright, set my teeth against the complaint from my hip, and walked out to join him. "How bad?" he asked, not looking up from the stove. 4 out of 10, I said. "Liar." 6, I admitted. "Maybe 6.5. He set a mug on the table in front of me. "Eat something. Then you tell me what today looks like." I wrapped both hands around the mug and felt the warmth go into my palms, and I said, "Today we go look at my son's neighborhood." Jack turned from the stove and looked at me with the particular expression he was developing specifically for moments when I said something he thought was inadvisable. "Richard." "Not the house," I said. "We don't go near the house. We take your truck because he doesn't know your truck, and we drive the parallel street 1 block over, and you park, and I use your field binoculars, and I watch." I met his eyes. I have to know what I'm dealing with before I walk into any police station. I need to see him moving. I need to see his pattern. Jack turned back to the stove, picked up his own mug, and said, "Eat first." We drove into the Lakewood development from the west, coming in on Garrison Street, and parking in the shadow of a HOA maintenance lot on the parallel block, where a line of mature cottonwoods gave us a clear sight line to the rear corner of Daniel's property. Jack cut the engine and handed me the binoculars without a word. I raised them and found the house. It looked exactly the same. That was the thing that hit me first, hard enough that I had to lower the binoculars for a second and breathe through my nose. The same gray siding, the same landscaping that Emily had always kept immaculate, the same black mailbox at the end of the driveway that I had helped Daniel install 3 summers ago on a Saturday afternoon when he could not get the post straight and kept swearing under his breath, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from laughing. "You okay?" Jack asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm working." I raised the binoculars again. Daniel came out the front door at 8:52. Suit jacket, leather bag over one shoulder, coffee travel mug in hand. He walked to the Suburban, the same black Suburban, and he hit the key fob, and the lights flashed, and he got in, and he backed out of the driveway, and he drove away. Like nothing had happened. Like the previous Tuesday afternoon had been any other Tuesday afternoon. My jaw tightened so hard I felt it in my back teeth. 35 years of reading people told me exactly what I was looking at: a man who had done something and filed it away and moved on because that was the only way a certain kind of person could function. Not guilt, not anxiety, just forward motion. Compartmentalization so complete, it looked from the outside like innocence. "He looks normal," Jack said carefully. "That's what makes him dangerous," I said. Emily came out 90 minutes later, in workout clothes, got into her white Audi, and drove in the opposite direction. I noted the time in Jack's field notebook, which I had appropriated for my own use the night before with his permission. 8 minutes later, a black sedan I did not recognize pulled up and parked across the street from the house. It sat there for 11 minutes, then left. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Gray plates," Jack said. "Not Colorado." "No," I said. "Not Colorado." I wrote it down. We watched for 2 more hours. At 11:15, I noticed something that sent a cold thread down the back of my neck. The garage, Daniel's garage, where I had found the phone, had a new camera mounted above the door. Fresh bracket, no weathering on the hardware. That camera had not been there 6 weeks ago when I had last visited the house. It had not been there a week ago when I had been in that garage picking up a phone off the floor. "New camera," I said. "Mounted in the last week." Jack leaned forward and looked. "After the incident. Or just before?" I said. My mind turned it over. He was already preparing. He needed to know if anyone came onto the property. I lowered the binoculars and looked at Jack. He wasn't just improvising that day. He had been building toward it. The camera, the phone, the forest road. I pressed my knuckle against my chin hard, the way I always did when the shape of something was coming clear. He had a timeline, and I walked into his garage and picked up that phone and accelerated it. "So you being in that garage didn't just spook him," Jack said slowly. "It pushed him to move faster than he'd planned." "Which means he made mistakes," I said. "Rushed people make mistakes, and I know exactly where to start looking for them." I clicked the pen against the notebook. "Tonight is Tuesday." Jack looked at me. "The pattern. Every Tuesday," I said. "He drives to the same location, stays 90 minutes, goes home. 3 months of the same routine, and I filed it away without knowing why." I looked at the house one last time through the binoculars, then lowered them and handed them back to Jack. "Tonight I need to follow that car, just to see where it goes. That is all. Just the destination." Jack took the binoculars and set them on the dash and looked at me for a long moment. "You're not going to like what you find, are you?" I looked at the house. "No," I said. "I don't think I am." Martin Webb's office was on the 14th floor of a building on 17th Street that had been there since 1978 and smelled like an old carpet, good wood, the particular dry warmth of a place that had been heated and cooled and heated again for 47 years. I had been coming to that office since 1994. I knew the receptionist's name, knew which chair in the waiting room had the loose armrest, knew that Martin always kept the blinds on the west window tilted down because the afternoon glare gave him headaches. Walking in wearing Jack's jacket and someone else's shoes with a cervical brace and 4 days of stubble was not my finest entrance. The receptionist, Louise, 22 years at the front desk, looked up and her face did something complicated. "Mr. Carter," she said, and her voice went soft in a way that told me I looked exactly as bad as I felt. "He's expecting you. Go right in." Martin was already on his feet when I pushed open the door. He came around the desk fast, not running, but close, and he gripped both my arms and looked at my face the way a man looks at something he was not sure he was going to see again. His eyes were bright and his jaw was tight, and he said, "Richard." And then he cleared his throat hard and said, "Sit down, right now, sit." I sat. My hip thanked me. Martin went back behind his desk, but he did not sit. He stood with his hands flat on the surface and he said, "I have been on the phone since 6 this morning. I need you to look at something, and I need you to hold it together when you see it." He turned his monitor toward me. Hospital corridor footage. Denver General date stamped the morning of my discharge. The angle was from above the elevator bank looking down the main hallway toward the discharge area. I watched myself walk out of that elevator. Not shuffle. Not wander. Walk carefully, yes, because of the brace, but steadily with my hand on the wall for balance, and my head up and my eyes tracking the environment the way they always do. I watched Daniel appear from the right side of the frame, smiling, hand extended. I watched Emily come in from the left with the flowers in the bag. I watched myself smile at both of them. My throat closed up. My eyes went hot, and I pressed my fingers against them hard because I was not going to do this in Martin's office. I was not. "Richard," Martin said quietly. I'm fine, I said. My voice came out thicker than I wanted. Keep going. The hospital footage shows you exhibiting full cognitive awareness and voluntary motor control at the time of discharge, Martin said, and his voice had gone into its professional register, precise, clean the voice he used in depositions. It directly contradicts Daniel's statement to police in which he described you as, and I'm quoting here, confused and disoriented, asking repeatedly for his deceased wife and unable to identify his current location. I lowered my hand from my eyes. He said I was asking for Carol. Yes. Something moved through my chest that was not grief and not anger, but some combination of the two that did not have a name. A hot, pressurized feeling that made my hands grip the armrests until my knuckles ached. She has been gone for 6 years, I said. He used her name. He used Carol's name to make me sound like I had lost my mind. Martin held my gaze. Yes, he did. He let that sit for exactly the right amount of time, and then he said, There's more. The traffic system. He pulled up a second window. Highway 285 westbound footage, the camera positioned at the junction where the highway splits toward Lakewood and toward the mountain corridor. Time stamped 40 minutes after I left the hospital. Daniel's black Suburban. Right lane. Passing the Lakewood exit without slowing. Continuing west. Into the mountains. He told the police you were disoriented in the car, and he was trying to find a quiet place to help you calm down, Martin said. He said he pulled over on a side road near the foothills, and you got out before he could stop you and walked into the trees. I stared at the frozen frame of that SUV on the highway, and I felt a laugh try to come up, not a happy one, but the kind that comes when something is so precisely, elaborately wrong that your body does not know how else to respond. I pressed it back down. A quiet place to help me calm down, I repeated. That is his statement, yes. Martin. I turned to look at him directly. That road he drove down does not have a shoulder wide enough to pull over safely. I know because I have driven it 100 times. If he pulled over on that road in the dark, he would have put 2 wheels in a drainage ditch. I pointed at the screen. He knew exactly where he was going. He had been there before. Martin's expression did not change, but something in his eyes went very sharp. He picked up his pen and wrote something down. I'm going to need you to put that in a written statement. Exactly what you just said. He looked up. I called Detective Sarah Collins this morning. She's the investigator assigned to your missing persons case. I told her I represent a party with material evidence relevant to the case and that my client is alive and available to speak with her. I sat forward. What did she say, Pew? She said. Martin checked his notepad. If your client is Richard Carter, I'd like to know why he didn't call us himself 4 days ago. He looked at me over the pad. She is not going to be easy. Good, I said. I don't need easy. I need thorough. I stood up slower than I wanted to. Set the meeting. Tomorrow morning if she'll do it. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. And Martin, when you call her back, I want you to tell her one more thing. Martin raised an eyebrow. What's that? Tell her that when we come in tomorrow, I am going to explain exactly why I waited 4 days. I looked at him steadily. And tell her that by the time I'm done, she is going to understand that those 4 days are the reason this case is winnable. I buttoned the jacket slowly because my shoulder still ached when I raised my arm above chest height. I want Daniel to know I'm alive, Martin, within 24 hours of that meeting. I want the news to reach him. Martin set his pen down and looked at me the way he had looked at me a few times over 20 years, like he was trying to decide whether my judgment was sound or whether I had finally crossed a line. That's a significant risk, he said. If he knows you're alive and talking to police, He'll panic, I said. And panicked men make the kind of mistakes that put them in handcuffs. I held Martin's gaze. Trust me on this one. I have one more thing to confirm before that meeting. Something I'm doing tonight. And when I walk into that police station tomorrow, I want to walk in with everything. Martin looked at me for a long moment. Then he picked up his pen again. Tonight, he said carefully. Should I ask? Probably not, I said. He nodded slowly, the way a good lawyer nods when he has decided that certain things are better confirmed after the fact. Be careful, he said. And Richard, his voice dropped just slightly. Come back in one piece this time. Before I tell you what happened the morning I walked back into the light, I need to know if you are still with me. If this story has been sitting heavy on your chest, the way it has been sitting on mine, drop the number 71 in the comments right now. That is my age. That is the age a man should never have to prove that his life still matters. If you feel that, type 71, and let me see you down there. And before we go any further, I want to be upfront with you. The story you are about to hear contains some details that have been shaped for this format. Not everything is exactly as it happened in real life. If that changes how you want to experience this, I completely understand. You can step away right now, no hard feelings. But if you are staying, keep that number coming, and let's see this through together. I had sat across from people in rooms like this one more times than I could count. Gray walls fluorescent overhead, a table bolted to the floor, a two-way mirror along one side that nobody ever pretended wasn't there. For 35 years, I had been the man who walked in with the file and asked the questions, watching the hands, timing the pauses, listening for the places where a story got too smooth. It was a different thing entirely to be the one sitting in the chair. Detective Sarah Collins came in carrying 2 folders and a coffee mug, and moving with the particular economy of a person who had learned long ago not to waste energy on anything that was not directly useful. She was maybe 45, trim, dark hair, pulled back, wearing a blazer over a plain shirt. She set the folders on the table, pulled out the chair across from me, sat down, and looked at me the way I imagined I had looked at 1,000 people in 1,000 rooms just like this one, taking the measure of what was in front of her. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I'm Detective Sarah Collins. I've been the lead on your missing persons case since it was opened 8 days ago." She opened the top folder. "I have to be direct with you. When your attorney called me yesterday, my first reaction was skepticism. A man who has been missing for over a week, who is 71 years old and 8 days out from major neck surgery, shows up through a lawyer instead of a hospital or a patrol unit." She looked up from the folder, and her eyes were direct and entirely without warmth. "So before we go any further, I need you to tell me why I shouldn't classify this as a confused patient who wandered, got lucky, and is now embarrassed about it." I put both hands flat on the table. My palms were steady. I had made sure of that on the drive over. Because in 35 years as an insurance fraud investigator, I said, I learned that the difference between a case that holds up and a case that falls apart is evidence collected in the right order. I did not call your department immediately because I did not yet have enough to give you. I spent 8 days making sure that when I sat down in front of you, you would not be able to explain away a single thing I told you. I held her gaze. I am ready to give you all of it now, every detail, in the order it happened. Something shifted in Sarah Collins's expression, not warmth, not yet, but a recalibration. She uncapped her pen. "Then let's hear it," she said. I told her. I had rehearsed the sequence in Jack's truck on the way over, and I kept to it: the hospital, the water bottle, the wrong exit, the forest road, the slope, Daniel's hands on my chest, the exact words said. Not a word more than what I had directly experienced. Not a single detail I could not prove. Sarah Collins wrote without looking up for the first part of it. By the time I got to the slope, she had stopped writing and was watching my face. Your son pushed you, she said. Physically, both hands. Both hands flat on my sternum, I said. He did not say anything else before he did it. He was not emotional. He was not angry. I felt my throat tighten, and I swallowed it down hard. He was efficient. Sarah's jaw set slightly. She wrote something down. And then, he said, lots of wolves out here, Dad. The words came out of me the same way they always did when I said them aloud, like something with weight, something that landed. His wife said, hope someone finds you before they do. And they got in the car and they drove away. The fluorescent light hummed above us. Sarah Collins looked at what she had written for a moment, then looked back up at me. Mr. Carter, I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear it as a procedural question, not a personal one. Is there any possibility, any at all, that what you experienced on that road was a medical event, a post-surgical episode, a reaction to pain medication, a moment of disorientation that your mind has since constructed a narrative around? My hands tightened on the table edge. I felt the old anger try to rise, and I pressed it down because anger in this room was not useful. Detective Collins, I said carefully, I have the camera footage from Denver General that shows me walking out of that hospital under my own power with full situational awareness. I have traffic camera footage showing my son's vehicle traveling west on Highway 285 and passing the exit for his home without slowing. And I have a witness. I nodded toward the door where Jack was waiting in the hall. Sarah looked at the door, then back at me. She opened it and said, Mr. Morrison, come in, please. Jack came in and sat in the chair beside me, and he set his field notebook on the table in front of him, with the quiet deliberateness of a man who had been presenting evidence of things he had observed in the field for 40 years. Sarah looked at the notebook, and her eyes sharpened. Tell me what you found and when, she said. Jack told her. He was better at it than I expected, the clean sequential no editorializing. The trail, the timing, the slope, what Richard looked like when he found him. And then I noted a black Chevrolet Suburban leaving the Forest Access Road at high speed at approximately 2:15 in the afternoon. That road is unpaved and narrow. Nobody drives it fast unless they know it well, or they have a reason to leave quickly. He opened the notebook to the right page and turned it to face Sarah. Partial plate. Date, time, direction of travel. I've been writing down unusual vehicle activity on those roads for 40 years. It's habit. Sarah Collins stared at that notebook page for a long moment. She reached out and touched the edge of it without picking it up, the way you touch something you are already thinking about as evidence. She excused herself, and was gone for 9 minutes. I know because I counted. When she came back, she sat down, and she looked at me and she said, Mr. Carter, I am reclassifying this case as a criminal investigation. I will be requesting warrants for the vehicle and for phone records within the hour. She paused. I want to be clear with you, what I have right now is sufficient to open the investigation. It is not yet sufficient to make an arrest. That requires more. I know, I said. There is more. She nodded. Then we'll talk again soon. She gathered her folders and stood, and then she paused and looked at me with something that was not quite the expression she had walked in with. You said you waited 8 days to make sure I couldn't explain anything away, she said. Were you right? I looked at her steadily. Ask me again in a week. Jack and I walked out of the building into the cold March air, and I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 8 days. Jack held the door, and I went through it, and we were halfway down the front steps when Jack's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his stride slowed. Richard. His voice dropped. One of my old contacts at the ranger station just texted me. He turned the phone so I could see the message. Someone called the station this morning asking about trail camera footage from the forest access roads. Said they were from the county assessor's office. Station manager thought it was strange. Assessors don't pull trail cam footage. I read it twice. The cold air came off the mountains and moved through me. How long ago? I asked. Jack checked the timestamp. 2 hours before we walked into this building. I looked back at the police station, then out at the street. He already knows, I said. Or he suspects. He's trying to find out what the cameras caught before we do. I turned to Jack. How fast can your contact pull that footage? Jack was already dialing. Evidence moves at its own pace and does not care about yours. That was something I had learned early in my career and relearned approximately once a year for 35 years whenever I was the one waiting on a lab result. You can want something to move faster. You can call and ask and follow up. But the chemistry does not run any quicker because you need it to, and neither does the paperwork, and neither does the particular grinding bureaucratic machinery of a criminal investigation in a city the size of Denver. So I waited. And waiting was its own kind of work. Jack's cabin had become something between a safe house and a field office over the past week and a half. The kitchen table had my notepad on it, 3 pages dense with observations, timelines, names and questions with question marks that I kept going back to and adding to and occasionally crossing out when the answer had arrived. Jack had given me full use of his landline and his truck and his patience, which of the 3 turned out to be the most valuable. Martin called on the 11th day after 11 in the morning. I picked up before the second ring. Tell me. They found the bottle, Martin said, and his voice had the particular quality it got when he was holding himself very controlled because the news was significant. Sarah Collins led the recovery team back to the forest access road 3 days ago. The bottle was still there, caught under the root edge of a fallen log near the original vehicle position, protected from most of the snowmelt. Intact. My hand tightened on the receiver until I felt the plastic creak. And the lab ran it yesterday. Richard. Martin stopped, cleared his throat. The bottle contained lorazepam, dissolved in the water. The dosage was substantial, well above anything that could be explained as accidental contamination or a misplaced prescription tablet. Whoever put it in that water knew exactly what they were doing and exactly how much to use. He paused. There was also a DNA profile recovered from the lip of the bottle, saliva trace consistent with the person who last sealed it after opening. I pressed my free hand flat against the kitchen wall and felt the rough wood grain against my palm, and I said very carefully, "Whose DNA, Martin?" "Emily's," he said. "It's a match to the voluntary DNA sample she provided as part of the missing persons investigation standard procedure. When a family member reports someone missing, they ask for elimination samples. She gave one without hesitation." Another pause. "Which means she did not know the bottle had been left out there. She thought it was gone." The kitchen tilted slightly. Not physically, I was standing perfectly still, but something inside me shifted the way things shift when a shape you have been trying to see finally resolves into what it actually is. My chest did not tighten. It went hollow. A different thing entirely. Emily, who had pushed the wheelchair, who had adjusted my bag strap on the way into the elevator, who had asked the nurse in that half-dropped voice about sedatives and elderly patients and drug interaction thresholds, who had handed me a bottle of water with both hands and a warm smile and said, "You need to stay hydrated." "Richard," Martin said, "are you with me?" "I'm here," I said. My voice came out wrong, not broken, but scraped like something had been drawn across it. "Tell me the rest." "I pulled Emily's employment history last night," Martin said. 8 years as a facility manager at Sunrise Senior Care in Aurora. Full medication administration oversight. She managed formulary access, tracked controlled substance dispensing logs, supervised nursing staff on pharmaceutical protocols. He let that sit for a moment. She knew exactly which drug to use, exactly what dose would incapacitate a post-surgical patient your age without putting you into cardiac arrest, and exactly how to source it without a personal prescription. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down because my legs had decided they were done standing for the moment. I pressed the heel of my hand hard against my sternum. She built the whole thing, I said. Daniel decided to do it, but Emily built it. That is my read, yes, Martin said. I looked at the notepad in front of me, the 3 pages of observations, the question marks, the crossed-out lines. I thought about Emily in that garage hallway, when I had come in unannounced, the way she had looked at me for just a fraction of a second, before her face rearranged itself into something pleasant and welcoming. I had filed that look. I had filed it without knowing why. Now I knew why. Sarah Collins is requesting an arrest warrant for Emily, Martin continued. Physical evidence plus the DNA match plus the professional background establishing means and knowledge that is a solid probable cause package. The warrant should come through within 48 hours. And Daniel? I asked. Daniel is more complicated, Martin said. We have the camera footage, we have the witness account, we have the pattern of behavior. But the physical evidence directly links Emily. For Daniel, we need something that puts him at the wheel of the decision, not just the car. He paused. Richard, there is something else. Sarah Collins is moving to request a warrant for Daniel's phone as well, the one you found in the garage. My hand went still on the table. If he wiped it, I started. That's the concern, Martin said. A factory reset destroys local data. If he was thorough about it. He wasn't, I said. The certainty of it came up through me fast and clean the way certainty does when it is not hope dressed up as knowledge, but actual knowledge. Martin listened to me. When Daniel was 17 years old, he lost a hard drive. A school project, 18 months of work gone in an afternoon because he had not backed it up. He cried for 2 days. Real crying, not teenage frustration, genuine grief over something he had lost, that he could not get back. My voice was steadier now, the hollow feeling replaced by something colder and more useful. After that, he backed up everything, automatically. Cloud sync on every device, every account turned on and left on. I teased him about it for years. It was a standing joke between us. I stopped. The irony of it landed in my chest like a stone dropped in still water, the concentric rings of it spreading outward. He would never have thought to turn it off. It was as automatic to him as locking the front door. He reset the phone, but the sync happened before the reset. Martin went very quiet on his end. The productive kind, the kind I had learned to recognize over 20 years as the sound of a good attorney reorganizing everything he had just heard. If the cloud account is still active, he said slowly. It will be, I said, because to deactivate it, he would have had to think about it specifically. And Daniel did not think about it because Daniel believed the phone was the only copy. I looked out the window at the pine trees, Jack's cabin, backed up against the same pines, the same cold light. Whatever is on that phone is also on a server he cannot touch. He just does not know it yet. Martin exhaled, long, slow, the sound of a man who had just watched the shape of a case change. I'm calling Sarah Collins right now, he said. The warrant language needs to include the cloud account associated with the device serial number, not just the physical phone. He was already moving. I could hear his chair, his keyboard. Richard, if you're right about this. I'm right, I said. Call her. I set the phone down and sat at that kitchen table with both hands flat on the notepad, and I looked at what I had written across 11 days. Every thread running toward the same center. Every question mark that had an answer now or was about to. Jack came in from outside, stomping mud off his boots in the doorway, and he looked at my face and said, "Martin called." Martin called. I confirmed. Jack pulled out the chair across from me and sat down and folded his hands on the table. "Tell me." So I told him. When I finished, Jack looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at me, and he said, "The cloud backup." "The cloud backup," I said. Jack shook his head slowly, not in disbelief, but in the particular way a person shakes their head when something is so precise in its irony that words do not quite cover it. "All those years of being careful," he said, "and the thing that brings him down is a habit he learned when he was 17. "Yes," I said. "And despite everything, despite the 11 days, and the brace and the bruises, and the hollow place in my chest where my son used to be, I felt something that was not quite satisfaction, but was in the same family. The feeling of watching the truth find its own way to the surface." "That's exactly right." The warrant was executed at 6:58 in the morning. I know the exact time because Martin called me at 7:03, 5 minutes after Sarah Collins's team walked through Daniel's front door, and his voice had the particular tightness of a man who was relaying information as fast as it was coming to him. "They're in, Patsum," he said. Daniel answered the door. He has his attorney present, got there in under 10 minutes, which means he called ahead last night. He knew this was coming. I was standing at Jack's kitchen window with the phone pressed to my ear and my free hand flat against the glass, watching the morning light come across the pine tops. "He knew," I said. "He's been waiting for it since the day I walked into that police station." "It doesn't matter that he was ready," Martin said. "Ready doesn't help you when the warrant is signed." I waited. Jack sat at the table behind me with his coffee and did not say anything. Just watched my back and let me have the phone call. 8 minutes later, Martin called again. They found the phone, locked in a small personal safe in his home office, a SentrySafe residential grade. Daniel provided the combination without being asked. A pause. "That should have been my first sign he wasn't worried about the phone." "Because he already reset it," I said. "Factory reset. Clean. The forensic tech confirmed it on site, no recoverable local data, no messages, no photos, no call history, nothing." Martin's voice was careful. "Richard, I need you to stay with me here because the next part matters." My hand tightened on the receiver. "I'm with you." The tech pulled the device serial number and ran it against active cloud accounts. Daniel's backup account, the one tied to that phone, had never been deactivated. Auto-sync was still enabled. The last successful sync to the cloud server occurred 4 days before he reset the device. Martin stopped. I heard him exhale. The sync completed before the reset. The cloud copy is intact and accessible through the account credentials which the warrant covers. I pressed my forehead against the cold window glass. My eyes were burning, and I did not entirely understand why not grief, not relief, something that did not have a clean name. "He didn't turn it off," I said. My voice came out barely above a murmur. 41 years old, and he never once thought to turn off the automatic backup. "No," Martin said. "He didn't." I heard noise on Martin's end, a voice in the background, someone talking fast. Then Martin came back. "Richard, Sarah Collins is on with the digital forensics unit right now. They're pulling the cloud content. She's going to call me the moment they have something to look at." "How long?" "Minutes. The files are already downloading." Another pause, longer this time. "Richard, I need to prepare you for the possibility that what they find on that phone is significantly worse than we expected." My jaw tightened. "Prepare me how?" I mean that this may not just be evidence of what happened to you. It may be evidence of something that happened before you, to someone else. His voice was very quiet now. Sarah mentioned that the video files have a date stamp from 4 months prior to the incident in the forest. The morning light was full across the pines, now gold and clean and indifferent to everything below it. I thought about the phone on the floor of that garage, the weight of it in my hand. 10 seconds I had held it before Daniel walked through the door. 10 seconds of not knowing what I was holding. Martin's phone beeped a call waiting signal. "That's Sarah," he said. "Hold on." He put me on hold. The hold music was something instrumental and entirely wrong for the moment. I turned from the window and looked at Jack, and Jack looked back at me, and I said, "They found something on the cloud. Video from 4 months ago." Jack set his coffee mug down on the table. His face did something complicated. Martin came back. His voice had changed. Not broken, controlled in the specific way a person controls their voice when what they are about to say requires it. "Richard, they watched the video. I need you to listen to what I'm telling you, and I need you to stay steady." "Tell me," I said. "The video shows Daniel and Emily at an industrial property the forensics team is working on identifying the location. There is a third person in the video." Martin stopped. "He is not alive by the end of it." The kitchen went very still. Not quiet, I could hear Jack's breathing, the creak of the cabin, a bird somewhere outside, but still in the way a room goes still when something enormous has just been shut down inside it. "Who?" I asked. My voice came out flat. "Do they know who he is?" "Not yet. They're running the footage through identification now." Martin's breath came carefully. "Richard, Sarah Collins's exact words when she called me were, 'This is no longer a case of reckless endangerment. We are looking at premeditated murder and attempted murder.' She's requesting an emergency hold on both Daniel and Emily, pending the identification of the victim and additional warrants." I walked to the table and pulled out the chair and sat down. My legs had made the decision for me. Jack reached across and put his hand on my forearm, not saying anything, just there, the way a man who has spent 40 years in the field knows when another man needs an anchor point. "Richard," Martin said, "are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "I'm here." I looked at the notepad on the table, 12 days of work, every thread, every question mark. One question mark left. "Martin, when they identify the man in that video, I need to know immediately. Not through channels, not through a report. You call me the moment you have a name." "I will," Martin said. I hung up and sat at that table with both hands around nothing, and Jack looked at me and said quietly, "What else do you need to do?" I looked at the notepad, at the one thread I had not yet pulled. "There's a warehouse," I said, "on the west side of the metro. Daniel goes there every Tuesday. I followed him 2 weeks ago, and I have the address." I looked up at Jack. I never told Sarah about it because I was waiting to know what was on that phone first. Now I know enough. I stood. "Drive me to the police station." Soon. 3 days after the warrant was executed, Daniel and Emily were released on bail. I expected that too. Daniel had access to money, enough of it, or enough of what looked like it, and a defense attorney who had apparently been on retainer for longer than I wanted to think about. The bail hearing lasted 40 minutes. Martin sent me the courthouse footage on his phone, Daniel walking out in the same suit. He had been detained, and his attorney on one side, Emily on the other, her hand through his arm. She had her sunglasses on. He did not. He looked straight at the camera on the way down the steps. Not at a reporter, not at anything specific. Just at the camera. Like he was looking for something behind the lens. like he was looking for me. I was not there. I was sitting across from Sarah Collins in her office at the Denver Police Department, and I was telling her about a warehouse on West Alameda Avenue that a man visited every Tuesday evening for at least 3 months without variation. Sarah had a legal pad in front of her, and she was writing fast. "You followed him yourself," she said. "On foot or by vehicle?" "Vehicle," I said. "A truck that he didn't know and had no reason to connect to me. I parked a block east and used binoculars. He went in at 7:14 and came out at 8:49, 95 minutes. Same pattern the following Tuesday. I did not follow him the second time. I simply confirmed from the street that the vehicle was present at the same time." "And you're certain it was his vehicle?" "I have the plate memorized," I said. "I have had it memorized since the day I walked out of this building with Jack Morrison, and I have not written it down once because I did not want it written anywhere that wasn't this room." I held her gaze. "You want it now?" She turned the legal pad toward me and held out the pen. I wrote the plate number from memory. She looked at it, then picked up her phone and read it to someone without identifying herself. Just the numbers and letters, then said, "Run it and call me back." She set the phone down and looked at me. "Mr. Carter, I have to ask you something directly." "Go ahead," I said. "You have been conducting what amounts to a parallel investigation for 2 weeks. You followed a suspect, you gathered observations, you identified locations. You did this without notifying law enforcement." She tapped the pen against the pad. "I am not here to lecture you about that. But I need to know, is there anything else you found that you have not yet told me?" I looked at her steadily. "That is everything," I said. "The warehouse is the last piece I was holding." "Why were you holding it?" "Because I needed to know what was on that phone before I handed you a location," I said. If the phone had been truly clean, if Daniel had been smart enough to not just reset it, but to deactivate the cloud account, then all I had was a warehouse a man visited on Tuesdays. That is not evidence of anything. It becomes evidence only in context. I leaned forward slightly. "Now you have the context." Sarah looked at me for a moment, then nodded once sharp, and decided, and picked up her phone again. The surveillance warrant for the warehouse came through in less than 24 hours. I know because Martin was on the phone with Sarah's office tracking it. By the following morning, Sarah Collins had a team at West Alameda with bolt cutters and a forensic accountant named Dwight Okafor, who had been pulled in from the Financial Crimes Division. Martin called me from outside the building at 10:17. "Richard," he said, and his voice was careful and very precise the way it got when he was trying to give me information without editorializing. "The warehouse contains documentation, a significant volume of it. Shipping manifests, invoicing records, wire transfer documentation, corporate registration papers for 7 entities that Dwight says do not correspond to any legitimate business revenue he can identify." A pause. He used the phrase, "shell company architecture." He said it's been running for at least 3 years. I pressed my thumb hard into my palm. "Daniel's logistics company," I said. "The legitimate operation is real. He has actual clients, actual contracts," Martin said. "But the declared revenue does not match the cash flow by a factor of approximately 4-to-1. The excess is being moved through the shell entities and dispersed in amounts calibrated to stay under federal reporting thresholds." He stopped. "Dwight says this is not amateur work. Someone built this carefully." "Emily," I said. "She managed facility finances for 8 years. She understood compliance documentation reporting requirements, audit trails." My voice came out rough. "She built the financial architecture the same way she built everything else." Martin did not argue with that. "Dwight is referring the financial records to the FBI field office this afternoon." The dollar amounts and the interstate wire transfers put this under federal jurisdiction. He paused again, and this time the pause was different weighted. Richard, they found something else. My hand tightened on the phone. A document folder, Martin said, sealed in a locked filing cabinet in the back office. Your name is on the tab. He read slowly: power of attorney, guardianship petition, property transfer authorization. All three documents bear your signature. The room I was standing in, Jack's cabin, the kitchen, the same four walls I had been living inside for 2 weeks, seemed to contract slightly around me. My signature, I said. Forensic document examiner will confirm, but the initial review indicates they are not your signatures. Close approximations, the same pen pressure pattern, the same letter formations, but inconsistencies in the terminal strokes that are characteristic of skilled forgery rather than natural signing. Martin's voice was very quiet. Richard, if you had died in that forest, these documents could have been activated within 72 hours. The house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, all of it transferable without probate, without a court proceeding, without anyone asking a single question. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not dramatically, I just sat down, because standing seemed like more than was required of me in that moment. My back against the cabinet, both hands in my lap, the phone still at my ear. They had been ready for a long time, I said. My voice came out like something scraped down to the bone. This wasn't about the phone. The phone just moved the timeline. They were already building toward this. Yes, Martin said. That is what the documents suggest. I looked at my right hand, the hand that had a forged signature in a filing cabinet on West Alameda Avenue. The hand that had shaken Daniel's hand in 100 rooms over 41 years, at his graduation, at his wedding, at the closing on his first house, when I had co-signed the loan because he needed the credit history, and I had trusted him completely. Martin, I said. My voice steadied itself the way it always did, eventually, the way it had been doing for 71 years. How long before the FBI takes jurisdiction? 48 hours, Martin said. Maybe less. Good, I said, because I need to go home. There are documents in that house that Daniel was looking for and didn't find, the originals, and I need them before any of this goes to a courtroom. Martin had the handwriting results by 9 o'clock the following morning. He called me while Jack was making breakfast, and I was sitting at the kitchen table going through the notepad for what felt like the 100th time, cross-referencing dates, looking for anything I had missed. When the phone rang, I picked it up on the first ring, and Martin did not bother with a greeting. The forensic examiner finished her analysis last night, he said. All three documents, the power of attorney, the guardianship petition, the property transfer authorization, are confirmed forgeries. High-quality approximations of your signature, but inconsistent in the terminal pressure on the downstrokes. She says whoever did this had a sample to work from, probably a scanned copy of a document you had previously signed and spent real time on it. He paused. This was not done quickly, Richard. This was practiced. I set my pen down on the notepad. My hand was steadier than I expected it to be, which told me some part of my brain had already known this and had simply been waiting for the confirmation. How long? I said. How long before they could have used them? 72 hours, Martin said. Once you were declared deceased, Daniel could have filed the power of attorney in probate court the same day. The guardianship petition was pre-staged as a backup in case you survived, but were ruled incapacitated. Either way, the property transfer could have been initiated within 3 days of the event in that forest. His voice was very controlled. Richard, he was not planning to wait. He needed this to move fast before anyone looked closely. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm hard enough to feel it. I want to go home, I said. A beat. Today, I said. Jack will drive me. I need to check something that cannot wait, and I need to do it before Daniel's attorney files anything that gives him access to the property. Martin thought about it for 3 seconds, which for Martin was a long time. Daniel is on bail conditions that prohibit him from visiting your residence without law enforcement present. You are legally entitled to enter your own home at any time. He paused. Go. But do not go alone. Jack drove. He did not ask me to explain myself on the way over, which was one of the many reasons I had come to value him the way I had. He just drove, and when we pulled onto my street in the quiet residential neighborhood off South University Boulevard, where I had lived for 22 years, he parked 2 houses down and said, "Take your time." I sat in the passenger seat for a moment and looked at the house. It was exactly the same. The same pale blue siding that Carol had picked out from a paint sample book in 1998, holding it up against the afternoon light in the front yard and saying, "This one, Mac. This one makes it look like it belongs here." The same oak tree in the front yard that had grown so large, its roots were starting to push up a corner of the front walk. The same porch light with the yellow bug bulb that I kept meaning to replace with a white one and had never gotten around to. My throat closed up so fast I had to turn away from the window. 22 years. Carol's house. My house. And 2 people had been sitting inside it calculating exactly how to take it from me. "Ready," Jack said. "No," I said. "Let's go anyway." The front door opened on my key without any resistance, which meant Daniel had not changed the locks. That told me something. Either he was confident, or he was careless, or both. I stepped into the front hall, and the smell of the house hit me like a physical thing, old wood, the particular dust of a place that has been closed for weeks, and underneath it very faint the ghost of Carol's perfume that had lived in the walls for 6 years now, and that I had never been able to bring myself to fully air out. My eyes went hot, and I pressed the back of my hand against them hard, and I said out loud to the empty hall, "Not yet, later." Jack came in behind me and pulled the door closed. The house looked undisturbed at first glance, but I was not looking at first glance. I walked through the front room and into the hallway and into my study, and I looked at the desk the way I would look at a crime scene, because that is what it was. The center drawer was pushed in at a 2-degree angle that was wrong. I always closed it. Flush the slight warp in the wood required a firm push that anyone who had not done it 100 times would not know to give. The stack of folders on the left side of the desktop had been squared up too precisely. Not the way I left things, but the way someone leaves things when they are trying to make it look like they never touched them. "They came in here," I said. My jaw tightened until I felt it in my neck. "They looked for the originals, and they didn't find them." "Because you have a hiding spot they don't know about," Jack said. "Because I have a hiding spot I have never told another living person about," I said. I moved the desk chair aside, rolled the small area rug back from the corner of the room, and pressed 2 fingers against a specific point in the 3rd floorboard from the wall. The board lifted. Beneath it was a metal fireproof box, gray combination locked, that had been sitting in that floor since the year after Carol and I moved in, and I decided that certain things needed to be somewhere no one would look without being told exactly where to look. My fingers found the combination by muscle memory, Carol's birthday backwards. The box opened. Inside the original deed to the house, my actual power of attorney documents my will as last updated 18 months ago, my retirement account paperwork, 3 years of tax returns, and my original insurance policies. All of it. Untouched. Exactly as I had left it. I sat back on my heels and let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 3 weeks. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something that was very close to gratitude. The old instinct, the one that had made me hide things in floors and keep copies of copies for 35 years, had done its job one more time. "Got it," Jack said from the doorway. "Got it," I confirmed. I was reaching to close the box when my phone rang. "Martin." I answered it, still crouched on the floor of my own study, with my original life documents spread across my knees. "Richard," Martin said, and his voice had something in it I had not heard before, careful quiet, and something else underneath that I could not immediately name. "There's been a development. It came from Daniel's son's school." I went very still. "Eli," I said. "Eli," Martin confirmed. His name was Eli Carter. He was 8 years old. He had Daniel's dark hair and Carol's gray-green eyes, that particular shade I had not seen on another face until the day Daniel brought Emily home. And I realized he had married a woman whose eyes were the same color as his mother's. Eli had inherited Carol's entirely. He called me Grandpa Rick. He had been calling me that since he was 3, when Grandpa Richard was too many syllables for his mouth. I loved it so much I never corrected him. He had strong, well-researched opinions about whether Spinosaurus or T-Rex would win in a fight. He liked the Colorado Rockies. He liked the granola bars with chocolate chips that I kept in my kitchen drawer, specifically because he liked them. The ones Carol had introduced him to the summer before she passed, when he was only 2 and did not yet understand what he was tasting, but reached for another one with both hands anyway. He did not know his father had tried to kill his grandfather. He was 8 years old. He only knew that something he heard did not sound right. Martin read me the summary over the phone while I sat on the floor of my study with the fireproof box open in my lap. I gripped the phone so hard the casing creaked. Eli's teacher noticed he had been quieter than usual for several days. She pulled him aside Thursday for a routine check-in. Martin cleared his throat. He told her he had heard something at home he could not stop thinking about. His father and mother were talking in the kitchen after he was supposed to be asleep. His father said he should have died in the woods. His mother said he almost did. And then... Martin stopped. "Then what?" I said. "They laughed," Martin said. "Eli said he didn't know why that felt wrong, but it did, so he didn't go back to sleep for a long time." I pressed the phone against my ear and stared at the open box and felt something move through me from the top of my skull down to the floor, not grief, not rage, something deeper and colder than either. The specific feeling of a wound in a place you did not know you had. Daniel had said that. In his own kitchen, with his 8-year-old son in the next room, and then laughed about it. Like the life of the man who had built his first bike and taught him to throw a baseball and stood at the back of his wedding crying into a handkerchief was something you put on a list of things that almost got done. "Richard," Martin said, "are you still with me?" "I'm here," I said. My voice cracked on the second word, and I let it. Mrs. Dolan followed mandatory reporting protocol immediately. By the following morning, Sarah Collins had a referral. A child forensic interviewer from the Denver Victim Assistance Unit conducted a recorded session with a licensed clinical psychologist present. "How did Eli seem?" I asked. My throat closed around the question. "Cooperative, clear, and consistent," Martin said, his voice gentling. "Matter of fact." He repeated what he heard word for word, and at the end of the session, he asked the interviewer one question. What did he ask? He asked, "Grandpa Rick was sick. Why would they laugh about that?" I stood up from the floor, without planning to my legs, just decided the way they sometimes did when something needed to be met, standing up. I walked to the window and put both hands on the sill and looked out at the oak tree in the front yard, afternoon light coming through the leaves. My eyes burned so badly I could barely see it. I pressed the back of my wrist against them and held it for a count of 5. That child heard something wrong and told an adult about it. I said, my voice scraped and rough. 8 years old. He protected me without even knowing he was doing it. He just knew it wasn't right, and he said so. Yes, Martin said quietly. He did. I stood at that window a long moment. Then I turned from it. Did Ethan Brooks receive the full case file? He wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. He says the case is strong, but he wants to hear it from you directly, in your own words. Tell him I'll be there at 8, I said. I picked up the fireproof box from the floor. And Martin, there is something I have been holding on to. Something Daniel said to me once years ago. I am going to use it at the trial, not before. What is it? Not yet, I said. Some things are better said in the right room at the right time in front of the right people. I looked at the oak tree one last time. Tomorrow at 8. Ethan Brooks's office told you everything about the man before he opened his mouth. No diplomas on the wall. No framed commendations, no photographs of handshakes with mayors. Just a clean desk, a single banker's lamp, 3 stacked file boxes with dates written in black marker, and a window overlooking Bannock Street, where morning traffic moved through gray March light. The office smelled like coffee and old paper and work. Ethan Brooks was 58, lean in the way some men get when they stop thinking of food as pleasure. Close-cropped gray hair. The particular stillness of a man who had learned that most rooms got quieter if he waited long enough. He stood when Martin and I came in, shook our hands without ceremony, and gestured to the chairs across from his desk. Mr. Carter, I've read everything Detective Collins sent over. I have one question I need answered in your own words, because it's the question the defense will spend the most time on. Tell me about the phone. What happened exactly in the order it happened? I kept my hands still in my lap. I picked it up off the floor face down under a shelf. I was going to put it on the workbench. I did not unlock it. I did not touch the screen. I held it for approximately 10 seconds before Daniel walked through the door and saw it in my hand. I handed it back immediately. Neither of us said a word. That was the entirety of my contact with that phone. Ethan wrote something on his legal pad and turned it toward me. 4 words, dramatic irony. He didn't know. He tried to kill you, Ethan said, for something you didn't even see. Yes, I said. That is going to be the center of this case. Not the physical evidence speaks for itself, but the reason. A son who tries to kill his father because he believes his father has seen something, when in fact the father has seen nothing. He tapped his pen against the pad. 12 people are going to understand that story in their bones. What are you charging them with? I asked. He opened the second file. Daniel Carter attempted first-degree murder premeditated. First-degree murder in the death of Victor Hammond. Conspiracy with co-defendant Emily Carter on both counts. Federal money laundering charges filed concurrently. He turned a page. Emily Carter conspiracy to commit first-degree murder administration of a controlled substance with intent to incapacitate, aiding and abetting in the abandonment of an at-risk adult under conditions likely to cause death. Forgery of legal documents, both defendants. I sat with that list. My chest felt like something very heavy was resting on it, the weight of those words assembled into a single picture of 2 people I had known for years. Eli, I said, my grandson's testimony. Something in Ethan's posture shifted. His account is clear, consistent, and given without leading questions. We do not need Eli on that stand. I will only call him if circumstances make it necessary, and not without consulting you first. I exhaled slowly and felt the tightness across my sternum loosen by 1 degree. Ethan came around the desk and extended his hand. Mr. Carter, I've prosecuted cases for 26 years. I have never had a victim come into my office having already assembled the evidentiary framework, identified the behavioral pattern, located the physical evidence, and managed their own emotional response well enough to present it in sequence. He held my hand firmly. I don't know whether that's impressive or heartbreaking. It's both, I said honestly. He almost smiled. Yes, I imagine it is. Martin and I walked out into the pale spring morning. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed the cold air. Denver in late March, the mountains white and distant to the west. Martin buttoned his coat beside me and said nothing, which was its own kind of consideration. Then he said, "You mentioned something 3 weeks ago, something Daniel said to you once years ago, that you were saving it. Are you going to tell me what it is?" I looked at the mountains, the same ones visible from the highway the day I lost consciousness, the same ones I had stared at from the floor of that forest. "No," I said, "not yet. Some things are meant to be said once in the right room at the right moment in front of the people who most need to hear them." I glanced at him. "You'll hear it when they do." Martin walked beside me in silence for a moment. "You're a frustrating man, Richard. Carol told me that for 42 years, I said, I never managed to fix it. The weeks between meeting Ethan Brooks and the first day of trial were the longest weeks of my life. And I have had some long weeks. People imagine that period as sustained dramatic tension, every hour on high alert, waiting for the next piece to fall. The truth is less cinematic. Evidence moves at the pace the system allows, which is not fast. Warrants get filed and processed. Lab reports get written and reviewed. The FBI financial forensics team runs numbers that take time to run. You wait. You eat breakfast. You call your lawyer. You wait some more. But things did move. And when they moved decisively. Jack's contact at this ranger station came through within 4 days. The trail camera footage from the National Forest Service monitoring station on the Forest Access Road was pulled and reviewed exactly what Jack had described. The camera had captured Daniel's black Chevrolet Suburban at 2:17 in the afternoon on the day of the incident. The image was clear enough to read the plate. Direction of travel away from the forest interior toward the highway. Martin called the morning the confirmation came through. "The plate is confirmed," he said. "The timestamp places Daniel at the scene within the window your account describes and directly contradicts his statement to police that he was home all day." He flipped a page. His alibi for that afternoon just ceased to exist. I was sitting at my own kitchen table back in my own house, sleeping in my own bed, drinking coffee from my own pot the way I had promised myself I would on the morning I walked out of Denver General. I pressed my hand flat on the table and said, "Good. There's more." The FBI identified 3 offshore accounts linked to shell entities registered in Delaware and Wyoming. The total traced flow is approximately $3.8 million over 31 months. 9 shell companies total. I closed my eyes. $3.8 million. 9 companies that existed on paper and nothing else. 31 months of building something that looked like success from the outside and was rotten all the way through. "Daniel changed attorneys," Martin continued. "He retained Parker Whitfield white-collar federal cases, significant step up in defense counsel. His new counsel approached Ethan's office about a possible plea arrangement." I set my coffee mug down hard. "What kind of arrangement?" "They didn't get specific. Ethan declined to discuss it. His response was, 'Not on a murder charge.' 3 words. That was all." Something moved through my chest, not satisfaction exactly, but the feeling of a door closing firmly on a hallway that should never have been opened. 3 weeks later, Jack drove me to a diner on South Broadway that had been there since 1962. For the first hour, we talked about nothing related to any of it. Jack told me about a pair of golden eagles he had been tracking, how they had finally established a nest on a south-facing rock face he had monitored for years without success. He described the way the female moved through a thermal, the economy of it, nothing wasted. I listened and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Something close to ordinary. "Jack," I said when we were working through second cups of coffee. "Thank you." My voice came out rougher than I intended. I have not said it the right way yet. Not once in all of this. You found me on that slope in the dark, and you did not leave, and everything that happened after happened because of that. I want to say it clearly at least once. Jack looked at me across the table. You would have found your way out eventually. I would have died of hypothermia by 10 o'clock, I said. Probably, he agreed. You're welcome, Richard. We both laughed, short and surprising the way laughter sometimes arrives in a place you had forgotten it could reach. Martin called that afternoon. The trial date is confirmed. Denver District Court, October 6th, 2025. I was standing in my study. I reached for my notepad and uncapped my pen. October 6th, 2025. Richard, Martin said, are you ready for this? I looked at the date. 7 months of work compressed into 2 numbers and a year. Ask me again on October 6th, I said. That night I stared at the ceiling in the dark and thought about what it would feel like to sit in a courtroom and look across the room at my son. There are some things you cannot prepare for until you are standing inside them. You can only make sure when the moment comes that you are still standing. I turned off the lamp. Outside, the October mountains were still months away. But they were there. They were always there. The Denver District Courthouse sits on the corner of Colfax and Bannock, a gray stone building deciding things since 1933. Exactly what it appears to be a place where the weight of what people have done to each other gets measured against the law, and something called justice gets handed down by 12 people who did not ask to be there. I had been inside once before, 22 years ago, testifying as an expert witness in an insurance fraud case. I had worn my good suit, carried my files, answered every question with precision. I had not imagined returning as the man the case was about. Jack drove me. Martin was already inside. I stood on the front steps in the October morning, cold and bright, the aspens along Bannock already turned yellow against the gray stone, took one slow breath and went in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. The way rooms where important things happen always seem smaller than what happens inside them. Wood paneling, high windows, letting in pale rectangular light, the smell of furniture polish, and something older underneath. Martin gripped my hand and said quietly, "You ready?" "No," I said. "Let's do this anyway." I had barely sat down when the bailiff brought them in. Daniel came first. Navy suit hair combed back, jaw set. He walked to the defense table and sat without looking in my direction. Not once. Not a glance. His attorney had coached him well. Emily followed in a gray blazer and dark slacks, hands placed flat on the table, expression composed rather than calm. There is a difference. Calm comes from inside. Composed is something built on the surface to keep everything underneath from showing. I looked at my son. He was 41 years old and still had my mother's jawline and Carol's dark hair. He still looked like my boy. That was what I had not been able to prepare for, not the anger, not the evidence, but the fact that I still saw the child I had raised somewhere behind the man at that table. My chest ached with it, the kind of pain that does not heal on any particular schedule. I pressed my thumb into my palm and did not look away. Ethan's opening statement lasted 31 minutes. He spoke quietly, precisely building the structure, without drama or heat, just the relentless accumulation of what had actually happened. On a Tuesday morning in March, he said, Daniel Carter and his wife Emily drove a 71-year-old man recovering from major surgery into a remote national forest, administered a sedative without his knowledge, pushed him down a rocky slope, and left him in below-freezing temperatures with no means of calling for help. He paused 3 seconds. Then they drove back to Denver and had dinner. The next morning, Daniel called police and reported his father missing, describing him as a confused elderly patient who had wandered away. The evidence followed in sequence: hospital camera footage, highway traffic cameras, a trail camera showing the Suburban leaving fast at 2:17, the water bottle, the lab report, Emily's background at Sunrise Senior Care. Then Exhibit 14 appeared on the courtroom monitor. I did not watch it. I watched Daniel. His face held perfectly still, but his hands resting on the table curled slowly inward until his knuckles whitened. When the footage ended, Ethan said, Victor Hammond filed a formal IRS disclosure report 22 days before he disappeared. He was the only living person outside the defendants with direct knowledge of the financial operation you have heard described. He is no longer in a position to testify. The courtroom went very quiet. Then, for the first time in 7 months, Daniel turned and looked directly at me. Not with guilt, not with fear. With calculation, the look of a man searching for a move he had not yet found. I had seen that look in 35 years of sitting across tables from people who had not yet accepted it was over. I held his gaze until he was the one who turned away. Martin said, Tomorrow morning, first thing, you're on the stand. Jack asked, How are you doing? I looked toward the door through which Daniel had just been escorted out. There is something I have been waiting 7 months to say, I told him. I think tomorrow I will finally be ready. The second morning of the trial, I took the witness stand. I had testified before as an expert, a professional who had spent decades translating complicated deceptions into language 12 strangers could follow. I knew the mechanics. Speak to the jury, not the attorney. Take your time. Answer only what is asked. What I had never done was sit in that chair and tell a story that was also my own life. Ethan walked me through it methodically. The hospital, the water, the highway going the wrong direction, the forest road, the cold, the slope. I told it the same way I had told it every time, in order with specific details, in a voice steadier than I had any right to expect. The jury watched me. 12 people whose job was to decide what the truth was. I looked at them when I answered. I did not look at Daniel. Then Ethan asked, Mr. Carter, what did your son say at the moment he pushed you down that slope? I turned to face the jury directly. My hands rested flat on the witness box, and I held them still. He said, Lots of wolves out here, Dad. The words landed in the courtroom, the way they had landed in every room I had spoken them, with weight, with the gravity of something said by a man who meant it. I watched it move across the jury box. The woman in the second seat drew a slight breath. The man in the front row's jaw tightened until a muscle jumped in his cheek. And Emily Carter? Ethan asked. She said, Hope someone finds you before they do. My voice did not waver. Then they drove away. Ethan sat down. Parker Whitfield approached the podium. Mr. Carter, he said, you had major surgery 3 weeks prior and were on prescription pain medication. Is it not possible your memory was compromised? I looked at him steadily. Mr. Whitfield, I spent 35 years as an insurance fraud investigator. My entire professional function was determining with precision which parts of a person's account were accurate despite medication trauma and deliberate deception. I paused one beat. I know what compromised memory looks like from the inside. What I have described is sequential, specific, and consistent with every piece of physical evidence in this record. My memory of that afternoon is the clearest I have made in 71 years. Whitfield said nothing further and sat down. Jack testified after me, unhurried and direct, the voice of a man who said only what he had actually observed. Ethan's closing was brief and exact. The jury went out at 2:14. 4 hours and 11 minutes later, they returned. Guilty. 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 Each verdict landing like something being nailed down, permanent and final. Emily guilty on every count. My eyes burned. I pressed the heel of my hand against them once, then sat straight. When the bailiff moved toward Daniel with handcuffs, Daniel turned toward me. He looked across that courtroom and found my face, and for one terrible second, I saw something I recognized from 41 years of being his father. Something almost like the boy he used to be. There and gone, I stood. Daniel, quietly, just enough to carry. He stopped, turned his head one last time. "Lots of wolves out here, Dad," I said. "Turns out the wolves didn't find me first, but justice found you." The door closed behind him. Jack placed one firm hand on my shoulder and let go. Martin said softly, "It's done, Richard." We walked out into the October afternoon. The mountains stood west of us, white above the timberline, exactly themselves, unchanged. "What now?" Jack asked. I looked at those mountains one long moment. "Now," I said, "I go home." I have thought a long time about what this story means. Not the trial, not the evidence, not the verdict, what it actually means. Here is what I keep coming back to. I almost died because my son believed I had seen something I had never seen. He made his decision based on a fear that was never real. And I have wondered more than once in the quiet of my own house whether any of it would have happened at all if we had simply talked to each other the way fathers and sons are supposed to. I do not know the answer to that. I am not sure I ever will. What I know is this: I was not saved by my own strength. I was not saved by 35 years of experience or by any plan I made. I was saved because God put the right man on the right road at the right moment, a man who still believed after 78 years of living that you do not leave anyone behind. That was not luck. I have lived too long to call something like that luck. If there is anything want you to take from this family story, it is not the courtroom or the verdict. It is simpler than that. Do not wait. Do not assume the people you love know what is happening inside you. Do not let silence build into something that destroys everything. I learned that the hard way. Please do not learn it the way I did. These grandpa stories are not easy to tell, but I tell them because I believe someone out there needs to hear that it is possible to survive the worst thing and still come home. If this grandpa story reached you today, if this family story made you feel something you needed to feel, leave a comment below and tell me. Share it with someone who needs it. And if you are not yet part of this family, here subscribe so you never miss what comes next. This has been a family story told from the heart. Thank you truly for staying with me all the way to the end. And one final thing before you go: the stories ahead contain some fictional elements built with the sole purpose of carrying a message worth hearing. If that is not the kind of content you are looking for, I respect that completely. Please feel free to find something that serves you better. But if you are staying, I am glad you are here. I will see you in the next one.